Hi, as mentioned, I am Joanna Merson, and I'm speaking to you today from Eugene, Oregon, traditional land of the Siuslaw and Kalapuya tribes. My co-presenter Alethea is going to be available in the Slack to answer some questions, and I also posted a link to the transcript for anyone who could benefit from that. I do ask that you don't share those. So the InfoGraphics Lab is a mapping and geospatial technology facility housed in the University of Oregon's Department of Geography, with a history and atlas making, 4 of which are shown here, as is a photo of the staff and a few students in the lab last year. For over 30 years, the lab has had a focus on using cartographic and data communication principles to support research, instruction, and public service activities. The Wyoming Migration Initiative is based out of the University of Wyoming, and their aim is advancing the understanding, appreciation, and conservation of Wyoming's migratory ungulates by conducting innovative research and sharing scientific information through public outreach. I should mention that ungulates are animals that walk on hooves, but I like to refer to them unofficially as animals that prance, though I have not done so in front of the biologists. So why are the WMI and InfoGraphics Lab partners? WMI's aim, animal migration is inherently spatial. So Matt, director of WMI, says that cartography occupies a critical role in the communication of the science and conservation of the wildlife migration corridors of the American West. As the title of the talk suggests, we make maps for many different formats or media. The flagship product of the collaboration was the print atlas, Wild Migrations, Atlas of Wyoming Ungulates. It has sections that include history, science, threats, conservation, and reference maps. The atlas contains about 250 maps, and yes, I counted, and dozens of other graphics. Both prior to and after publication, we've worked with WMI researchers and partners to share much of the research behind these maps for other digital, static, digital dynamic, and print media. For example, maps like this show the migration of mule deer migrating from the Red Desert to the town of Hoback, Wyoming. They look very different in different contexts. Depending on what data we show alongside we may be able to, alongside the migration routes, we may be able to focus on migration corridors, bottlenecks, threats, and successes. If it's animating, we can emphasize timing. Maps for government reports may be designed to explain policy implications and be subject to government USGS cartographic standards. Maps for academic titles may need to support methods and results. And of course, each journal has its own figure guidelines. Our maps on the Wyoming Migration Initiative website, social media, and in documentary films need to engage a broader audience. We can make animated and interactive maps for these platforms. Lastly, maps reformatted for news publications may require layout changes or coordinating with graphics teams who adapt the maps themselves. The primary research is done by the Wyoming Migration Initiative team and other collaborators. This includes animal capture, health testing, GPS collaring, satellite tracking, and some GIS processing. Developing stories are done collaboratively between both organizations. It includes brainstorming and a lot of whiteboard mockups. The collaborative design process involves weekly meetings, both with WMI and internal only. Each product gets a lead person, and almost all maps have staff and student contributions. The entire process is iterative. That is, designing the map can elicit new insights which impact the story and design. Also, many contributors means many mental pictures and perspectives. So the designs are worked out over weekly and monthly meetings with WMI and topic experts. As mentioned earlier, the outputs include reports, figures, social media, etc. However, this is a long-term collaboration. So after the outputs are complete, we still have data updates. Seasonal and annual data updates may lead to map updates or in rare cases, even change the story. One of our challenges is making a cohesive design or a continuity of branding. We strive to make sure WMI migration maps, which may cover different locations, species, be print or interactive, share a cohesive design. That way they are recognizably related. Many contributors over time have developed the WMI style. A lot of the styles in the staff's heads, but to help with consistency, especially as different contributors such as students join and leave the team, we've taken time to create a style guide, such as those shown here. You'll often see ungulate tracks in orange or purple. And to make use of this, we save the design work as styles or swatches in ArcMap and ArcGIS Pro or Illustrator. However, a really common workflow is to start with an existing map, add new data, and then import symbology or use your eyedropper, pan as needed, and then save as for the win. I definitely do that every time I make a little locator map. Another way we aim to achieve cohesive design is trying to use consistent base maps across different software. Many of our maps use a combination of a hillshade draped with land cover. On the left is the high-resolution georeferenced image. This was initially created in ArcMap, then fine-tuned in Photoshop. Notice the artboard, which is now highlighted in red, is much smaller than the actual base map we have available. That way, this base map can be reused at different sizes for multiple different maps, especially if the data ends up being a little bit bigger than we initially thought it was going to be. The base map in the animation on the right was created in Mapbox. It was designed to use a similar aesthetic across multiple zoom levels, and here we actually see it used in a Carto interactive map. I'd like to illustrate some of our other design challenges and solutions using the Red Desert to Hoback mule deer migration. We have mapped this 200-mile migration in every media. When faced with redesigning a story for a different outlet, we return to our fundamental principles of map design: composition, typography, scale, and detail. These maps show the migrations of individual animals from the Red Desert herd. The map on the left is from the Atlas, and on the right is a simplified version used for social media. When we redesign something from the Atlas, more often than not, we need to remove details. In this case, the many paths on the left are simplified and grouped into a single color, orange, on the right. New data was then added in purple. We added callouts, larger fonts, and increased font size. The base map was intended to maintain the palette, even though it was tweaked slightly as we advanced. Well, we don't just have challenges, but also many opportunities in this story. Different media afford different ways to represent time, perspective, and extent. So when making maps for the web, we try to leverage the power of animation to express how long migrations last and how far they go. The first example I'd like to show you is a set of our weekly social media maps. And I would just like to tell you, Joe is a mule deer. Joe is not me. I have been asked this before. But let's follow along with her journey. So during the migration season, we follow a single deer as she progresses on her migration, updating her progress each week. We focus on a single deer as an exemplar of the herd migration. These go on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We use our standard color palette for both the base map and thematic data. Minimal labels, large fonts, and very strong figure ground visual hierarchy. People follow along for what is in essentially real time for 2 to 3 months. You are watching it over a few seconds. I know it looks animated because we were careful to minimize the changes each week. However, these were posted over 15 weeks. And there you see Joe has arrived at her summer range. On the topic of animation, it's been a couple years since I preached the pros and cons of animated cartography at NACIS. Animation isn't always helpful, but it is useful to show both spatial and temporal context. To show the fidelity and how mule deer follow the exact same route with similar timing, we can concurrently animate the migration of a single deer over multiple years. These are tracks of GPS data of deer 255's migration over 4 different years. Incredible how much she follows her route and has almost the same stopovers on almost the same days of different years. In longer format animations, we use a cinematic style, including music, photos, and camera trap videos to leave the God's eye view perspective and get closer to the ground, following along the deer in their migration. The aim is to help the public connect and to share some of the WMI conservation successes. The flyovers are made in ArcGIS Pro and Adobe Premiere, Esri's imagery layer is draped over an extruded DEM. The labels are carefully placed in each keyframe. Additional labels are added in Premiere and post-processing. We do have time for a bit of a teaser, but I'll post the links to these full videos in Slack after the talk. I'm going to stop it there, and I'm actually not 100% sure you could hear the music, so you'll definitely have to check out those links. Shameless plug, you can follow Joe and Deer255 on your favorite social media platform. Joe's weekly fall migration updates are going to be posted soon. Now to touch on some of our technical choices. We use different software to leverage different functionality. We try to be output oriented, more than tied to any specific software in the lab. We hope that the WMI style is stronger than the software's inherent style. This particular collaboration uses the common ArcMap to Adobe Illustrator workflow. For animation, we use a similar, as I mentioned, ArcGIS Pro to Adobe Premiere workflow, adding labels and removing artifacts in the post-processing. Often we have to add new data years after we made the initial map. The new data may be new colored animals or more recent data. The update often changes the extent of the map, so it's extremely useful that we have a lot more area or extent than we need in many products. In many cases, the data doesn't exist all in one GIS file, so the map is already moved into graphic software, or we're making a compilation of multiple maps. In that case, we add the data to GIS with another element we can easily scale to, something already existing in the map, such as roads, shown in red in GIS, or a park boundary, and then we export the new vector lines into Illustrator and scale to match over there. Because we have a lot of data that are used in multiple maps, and many people are working on those, we store the data on university servers. Then all file and document sharing are done via network paths. So every map can be opened, edited, and saved by any of us from all of our networked computers. This setup made transitioning to remote work quite smooth. Because our data includes a lot of primary data from many different sources, we rely on data sharing agreements with both informal and formal by simply checking in with our research partners and before we modify and reshare. A lot of this work is done by WMI, who put the data together. Some concluding thoughts. Styling the animation that I've done benefit from having the work put in for over the years by Alethea and Jim, Matt, and the WMI team. Good communication is definitely key between partners and within the office. For example, it's never helpful when two different staff give differing directions to the students. That's why we use task leads. We started with Wyoming and are now working on a map series for the American West. States listed here. We will be participating in a meeting of the global migration coming up next, so maybe maps of the world. I would like to thank Jim, Alethea, Matt, and the WMI team, as well as all the UO students and alumni who are actually NACIS members that have contributed to the work shown. Please find us on Twitter, and from there you can reach us on the web as well. Thank you.